Major support for these broadcasts is provided by New York Community Bank, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Chelsea Lighting, Capital One Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Genova Burns Giantomasi Webster, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, the Wyckoff Group, Greenberg Traurig LLP, M&T Bank. Additional support is provided by Ackman Ziff Real Estate Group, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Briarwood Organization, Bruce Mosler, C.B. Richard Ellis, Colliers International New York LLC, Cushman and Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, DDG Partners, Friedman LLP, Accountants and Advisors, Flushing Bank, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, John Katsimatides, Red Apple Group, Madison Realty Capital, Margolin Weiner and Evans, LLP, Certified Public Accountants and Business Advisors, Massey Knackle Realty Services, New Banks, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Sterling and Sterling, SJP Properties, Stonehenge Partners, and These Friends.
So sometimes you get people who want to be school teachers, then they want to be guitarists, then they want to be social workers, but then they become really prominent, dynamic attorneys practicing in the state of New Jersey and New York. And today I'm fortunate to have a good friend and profile the life of my good friend Angelo Genova.
Hi, Michael.
Here.
Thanks for having me.
So, you know, when we got together, we were talking about relatives, going back, how the family came over. Tell me about your mother and your father and their parents. You know, coming over from Sicily, the booth, right?
Well, not completely Sicily. If you, my mother, who was a Neapolitan, married a Sicilian, and that's like marrying from a different country.
Right. You'll tell your mother how your mother and father met when she, you know, came over from the hotel.
I will, but I owe a lot to my heritage and to my great-grandparents and my parents and my grandparents. But my grandfather came in 1917 or thereabouts, came alone from Sicily as part of the great immigration from southern Italy. It was not uncommon for men to leave their families behind, which in of itself was a challenge. But he came here and he scrounged for a living and was able to put together some dollars and bring the rest of the family over in 1921. Worked as a trainman and a porter.
How did he meet your grandmother? She was 15, you remember?
Well, it was an arranged marriage back in the village of Calamonici in Sicily. And they met. In those days, you met and you fell in love because your parents told you that you'd meet and fall in love.
So he comes over alone?
Comes over alone. And he sets the stage for bringing his family to America. Had married my grandmother at a very young age. She was 15. They had 3 children that were born in Italy, made the trip over. Shortly before the trip, I lost what would have been an uncle of mine. And when she joined my grandfather here in the United States, they settled in Philadelphia, conceived my father, and he became the first in the family born and to them here in America. So he was a special child.
So that's Dad's side.
That's Dad's side.
We'll get back to Dad with the war and everything else. Let's talk about Mom's side.
Mom was a different story. Mom, in relative terms, was a more recent immigrant. She came to this country at the conclusion of the Second World War, was born and bred in the city of Naples, a beautiful city in its day, and in many ways beautiful today. She was one of 7 children and the only child in her family to come here to the States. What I like to say is the contrast is that unlike a lot of, I think, Italian Americans whose families come from rural regions, my mother's very much a city girl as a young lady and very much a city girl when she got here.
So you were saying to me your father grew up in New Jersey.
He actually grew up in Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, right. It was Philadelphia. And then he went into the war.
Correct.
And he was stationed in Europe.
Right. He enlisted in the United States Army. He was assigned to the 7th Army, which was led by General Clark. And his company, being part of the 7th Army, were part of the invasion of southern Italy, which was the first initial entry into the European theater, as you might recall. And as part of that invasion, he ultimately was stationed in Naples, where he met my mother. He was assigned to a company that managed a hotel in central.
She worked in the hotel.
Right, in central Naples. Actually, the hotel still exists to this day. It's a Starwood hotel. I visited it last year, actually, for the first time. And while I was there, I sought out the hat check room that my mother worked in, and that was the place for an inspiration for their original
So
romance.
was she a war bride?
She was a war bride. That's what they called them then. And she was among the first to come to the States because the Allied invasion in the southern part of Italy occurred over a matter of several months.
So she came over while your father was
They married in Italy. They had their courtship and engagement in Italy. Had, like most or some engagements, had some tumult, but worked through it. And she came over with a group of about 6 other women who also married American servicemen. And my father went ahead of her to make the plans and greet her here in the States by about a week or 2. And she came alone with these 6 other women, arrived.
Now, but isn't that there's a story about that. She takes the train to Philadelphia and something happens. Tell me that story.
She arrives in New York and she finds her way to Grand Central and gets on a train to Philadelphia. And imagine having no one in this country, not speaking the language, being a foreigner at the tail end of a global conflict. She comes to the States and has to find her way to Philadelphia, which is remarkable to begin with. And she gets on the right train, but she ends up in the wrong station. And my father and his family were waiting her arrival at the Penn Station in central Philadelphia, and she got off at the 30th Street station, which is just on the perimeter of the city. So that led to a great deal of confusion and consternation.
But she met a person at the station.
Her angel, as she would put it.
Angel,
Her
right.
angel. She met a gentleman that, in her best recollection is he was from Cuba, spoke Spanish, and they were able to communicate. And she did have an address, and he got her on the right local train to get to Norristown, Pennsylvania, where the family was living at the time. And the nice thing is he accompanied her. He apparently was a man of compassion and understood the circumstance. He accompanied her to Norristown, and when they arrived, it was late in the evening, and he didn't have a clue where they were going. He had an address. There were no taxis, and he was stuck at a train station at 2 in the morning with my mother. Obviously had to be a trustworthy fellow. And luck would have it, as he paced up and down trying to find how they would get to this address that she had, he stumbled upon the street. It was close and proximate to the train station. So he was able to get her to the house, and everybody was relieved and happy. And my mother's great regret, one of her great regrets in life, is that she retired, went to bed. She was tired, and they put up this man for the evening, and the family failed to get his name and address, so she never officially thank him.
She'll never know who the angel was.
Right.
So you told me that, okay, the family was living in Norristown. Your father goes to school on the GI Bill.
Right, he went to St. Joseph's University.
And he then becomes a school teacher. And you move from Norristown to Vineland.
To Vineland, New Jersey.
And this is before you're born, right?
No, I'm 2 at the time.
two.
So I was actually born in Norristown, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, small Italian family, right?
Right, right. Well, there were 8 of us.
There were 8, and you're in the middle, right?
I'm right in the middle. I have 4 older sisters and 3 younger brothers.
So he goes to Vineland, and what's his first job? Is it the school teacher?
Well,
or
he
was-
got his degree as an accountant at St. Joe's, and he was the first in his family to get a college degree. My father was a very hardworking fellow and was very proud of his efforts to get an education and to provide for his family. But he moves the family down to Vineland, New Jersey, which was quite a change, especially for my mom, I think, being a city person. But we set up shop, and he becomes an accountant for a manufacturer company in Vineland that was doing well. And he did that for a couple years, and he realized it really wasn't the occupation for him, and he craved something more. So he decided to shift gears pretty dramatically and become a school teacher. He was fortunate that the school district hired him with an accounting degree and without teacher certifications, and at the time they would give people an opportunity to do that. And I remember vividly as a kid going to school with him and watching how he would make do with what he knew and the methods he knew. I recall him, he had to teach a class on electricity. He was a math and science teacher, and he asked all the kids to bring in their broken appliances from home, their irons and their can openers and the like. And basically he turned it into an electricity exercise, and he just was very practical about education and how he would teach young people. And I think he found himself in that.
Now, what's very interesting, when we got together, you told me that there was this experience that happened which really changed you because of, let's say, the foreclosure on the house.
Right. Well, you know, it's hard today to raise a large family, and it was hard then to raise a large family. And the shift in my father's occupation no doubt had some consequences, and teacher salaries, at least in those days, were not particularly great. And so my father, in addition to teaching, held several jobs. He drove a bread truck. He did accounting on the side. He really would pick up whatever he could to supplement income. But he also had made a commitment that he would give us a private school Catholic education. And I think between that commitment and his challenges in earning, put him in a tough situation, which ultimately led to a personal bankruptcy that I think he always felt bad about, but I've always admired his ability to come out of that. But that event, I was about 9 years old, and that led to the loss of our home, and it kind of accelerated my maturity and my appreciation for not only hard work, but the need to be secure in one's existence.
Now, when you were growing up, you had a variety of jobs, but one thing that helped you growing up was you got a guitar and you learned to play.
Well, I always loved music, and we were a musical family, and a few of my sisters played piano, and we all liked to sing, and that was one of the pastimes. So I stumbled upon a guitar. I couldn't remember even how we got it, but somebody, I think, gave it to us as a gift. I remember it had 2 strings. But I was able to figure out how to play those 2 strings, and that ultimately led to a real live guitar. And like most children of the 60s, music was a big part of our life. So I joined a little local garage band and started out as a singer in that group at the age of 12, and then taught myself guitar. And what became a hobby actually became a vocation.
So you graduate high school.
Mm-hmm.
And you really, you had basically a sheltered life. You had been living in Vineland. You hadn't gone around. You told me you were only in New York City one time in your life. Prior to that, you went to Montclair.
I went to
You
Montclair
went to
State.
Montclair State. Now, that's an interesting place. How did you went there because it had a good school teaching program, right?
Yeah, well, coming from the family that I came from, and given the financial challenges we faced, my parents strongly encouraged all of us to get an education, but we all knew that we had to do it on our own racket, whether it was by private scholarship or otherwise, because it was not something that could be afforded at home. In my case, I was a very outgoing, animated, fun-loving student, but I wasn't particularly academically focused. So I really didn't qualify too much by way of academic scholarships. I didn't find myself intellectually or academically until later in life. So I remember that my aspirations were at the time modest, and I wanted to be a school teacher, and the best place to get that kind of degree in New Jersey was Montclair State. I still think it is. And I wanted to move away and experience a different kind of life, and Montclair State, being only 12 miles from Midtown Manhattan, offered me a combination of the things I was looking for. So I went up there, and if I can digress a little bit, talk about New York. My one New York experience before coming up here was visiting Patsy's restaurant on 56th Street, because the Scognamilia family who founded the restaurant was a relative of my mother. So I remember being 5 years old and going down Fifth Avenue in a dilapidated 57 Ford station wagon, just being in absolute awe of the skyline. So coming back at the age of 18 and going to college, you know, I always left with the indelible impression of what a vibrant place this was. And I actually think that little trip inspired me and gave me the courage to move from the cocoon of Vineland to a world on the shadows of Manhattan.
Now, what was interesting, as you said, the vocation of the guitar in high school and the gigs subsequently became the way that you paid for college and even law school. Subsequently, you know, where, you know, it was Angelo and a friend doing a gig. You were in coffee shops, you were in other places. You were the singer, the guitar player, right?
Yep. I played guitar and had a partner through college and later in life that worked with me, and I played guitar and she played piano, and we worked clubs and bars and restaurants and events and the like. But what was great about it is, you know, one of the things I learned from the experience was that when you love what you do, the money's really not the relevant consideration, and it was a great way to earn a living to finance my education and finance my existence.
So what happens? How did you decide to become an attorney?
Well, while I was in college, one of the reasons I'm fond of my alma mater, Montclair State, is because it did provide an environment for someone like me, a first-generation, college-bound student, with an environment to find myself academically, mature, intellectually, and it was a place that I really blossomed. I got very active in student government. I was the president of the student body early in my sophomore year. I won the election, which was really unheard of. I served as a student representative to the Board of Trustees, and I got to, at a very young age, interact with adults and bright people. And I had the responsibility at the age of 19 of overseeing a budget of about $2 million, which was a lot of money at the time. So I learned a lot, and what I learned, in addition to the substance, was I learned a lot about my own capacities, and I learned about my own capabilities, and that fostered a confidence in myself, and I became more self-assured about my ambitions. So I was exposed to lawyers in that process and interacted with lawyers, and I was involved in interesting issues of the day, and I came to learn that I could be in the same room as these people, and I saw many of them had law degrees, and I thought, well, you know, that's a degree that I want to have.
So that's when you went to Rutgers.
Rutgers.
And you went for 2 degrees when you went to law school.
I did. Thanks for reminding me of that, Michael. I showed an early interest in labor relations because while I was an undergraduate at college, it was during a period when faculty on college campuses throughout the country were organizing into labor unions, and that had an effect, a direct effect on students. So as a student leader, I thought it was important that students have a role in that process. I learned a lot about labor law, collective bargaining. So I thought that that's the direction I wanted to go. So I got a degree simultaneously with my law degree in industrial and labor relations from the Rutgers Graduate School, which Cornell has a very similar program. In fact, they compete for the same students. But I was able to combine my degrees and was the first joint degree candidate for a degree in law and a degree in industrial and labor relations.
So you graduate there, and then you get a job in New York City, right?
Yeah, it was big doings, and that's the place that young lawyers want to go. And I was fortunate enough to have landed a job with one of the nation's largest management side labor law firms, a place that was a great start for me. A lot of quality lawyers, and more than the law, because a lot of great places you can learn the law, but I was fortunate to have worked with a rainmaker partner at the firm. I learned a lot about the business of law early in my career. I learned the importance of client relations. I learned the importance of responsiveness. I learned the importance of being effective for clients, not just spending their time and money. So I brought from that experience more than just understanding labor law. I brought from that experience an appreciation for what it means to build a law practice.
Stayed there a couple of years, and then what happens? You meet some guys?
Well, I decide that I was getting antsy. I thought there was more I could do with my life. I could see success at this firm, but I also had other interests. So I thought I needed to be in an environment that allowed me to be more entrepreneurial, gain the rewards from my entrepreneurship, and allow me to explore other things that were interested to me, like politics and government. And that firm, although a great labor law firm, was confining in other ways. So I was invited to become a partner with a lawyer who was about 10 years my senior, who I actually had retained to run a prepaid legal plan at my undergraduate school. And we knew each other personally, and I remember vividly taking a 70% pay cut and, you know, moving from this posh New York job to East Orange, New Jersey, to join this practice, and basically making a deal that I would make my living based on percentages of what I would bring in as a lawyer. He was a wonderful guy, but a challenged businessman, and I learned within weeks that a lot of the business had to be developed by me, which in retrospect was one of the best
Which was
things.
a great exposure.
Right, sure.
It helped you. But during that period of time, you know, we're going to get into some of the cases, because you have one now which you may be in Washington one day to,
I hope so.
hopefully in front of the Supreme Court.
Right.
But, you know, as you said, you got involved with politics. You've been involved with 4 sitting governors, right?
I have been. I always had an interest in public service. I didn't know how I would be manifest, but I always had an interest in contributing. And 35 years ago, politics seemed like a place to contribute, and a place that would attract. Remember, this is still, I mean, I'm still a child of the Kennedy years, and at all time, and the notion of public service.
I'm so happy that you're much older than me.
But not that much. But when I returned to actually, while I was in law school, I did get involved a bit in the gubernatorial campaign of a then young congressman named Jim Florio, whose congressional district was contiguous to my own as a young man growing up in Vineland. So I gravitated towards his candidacy when he first ran. He stood for a lot of things that were important to me, and got involved in his campaign. And because there was a dearth of people in my new part of the state now, the northern part, that had an interest in this candidate from the South, I believe I came to his attention, and he saw in me the qualities that led to a lifelong friendship. So from that, one of the roles I played in his political campaign was to lawyer. And ultimately, when he ran again in '81, I served as one of the key lawyers to his gubernatorial campaign, right, to his candidacy. Over time, because of my work as a lawyer representing political figures in election matters, which started as a hobby and became an important part of my practice, I was asked by several governors to work with them, not only in election-related matters, but given my history as a labor lawyer, they asked me to help them out.
Right. So, because with 5 minutes left, I want to really get to a couple of meat and potato items over there. One of those governors a couple of years ago said, hey, maybe the Port Authority could use you, right?
Well, you know, Governor Corzine, then Governor Corzine, was not the governor at the time. So it was Governor McGreevey, who at the time thought that I could contribute. And in 2004, nominated me to serve as a commissioner of the Port Authority, representing the interests of the state of New Jersey and the interests of the region. And I welcomed that opportunity, and I served. And served during a very interesting time in the aftermath of the 9/11 tragedy, when the focus of the port was to come up with a plan that we could work out with Larry Silverstein and develop that part of the city in a manner consistent with the needs of the city, but respectful of the interests of the families and other stakeholders who lost so many at that site.
I alluded before about this matter which is going to go to the Supreme Court. Tell me about that.
Well, as I was saying before, my work as a lawyer in electoral politics has involved me in not just partisan litigation, but litigation surrounding Voting Rights Act issues and issues of voter suppression, which today are timely. And I handled a case very early in my career that has had staying power over the last 35 years, which involves voter suppression issues, which has had a long and tortuous history, but most recently has been appealed by the other party to the litigation to the United States Supreme Court. And I might have my first opportunity to argue a case before that body, which would be a great way to cap a legal career.
3 minutes left. A couple years ago, you decide to leave the suburbs of New Jersey and go into Newark and create a firm which today is, besides being a Newark powerhouse, a regional powerhouse with offices throughout the state and in New York City. Tell me a little bit about Genova Burns Giantomasi Webster.
Well, that's great. I'm glad you got that all out, and Frank will be very happy with the pronunciation. But I'm a big believer in any organization that be dynamic change, and that in order for organizations to grow, you want to push the envelope and take some risks. And we decided that Newark had and continues to have a future of consequence. It had new leadership. It's got an infrastructure that rivals, that is unrivaled in my view, at least in the region. And we also have come to appreciate that times are changing and demographics are changing, and young people want to live in cities, and they want to access cities, and they want to get to work by trains, and they want to have quality of life that comes with, vibrant neighborhoods. So we thought the place for us to grow was to be in a place that is going to attract urban development, residential and commercial, and be in a place that can attract young people and young lawyers. So Newark represented that to us, and our vision and the promise of our risk has been realized. We've grown to now close to 90 lawyers, and I appreciate your calling us a regional powerhouse, but I think we're making our way and making our place in the legal community.
Wife and kids, tell me that, because if I didn't with 1 minute, your wife wouldn't talk to me and I would be dead.
Well, the backbone of my success in the last 15 years has undoubtedly been my wife, Donna. She's a Queens girl, grew up in Maspeth, and is a New Jersey transplant, if you will. She
and then
comes
you
from
have
New York.
three
Lovely children. My daughter Nicole, married to her husband Bob. They're both school teachers. Nicole, special ed, devoted her life to helping challenged children, and Bob, who's a very capable musician and music director. My son Dave, who is a burgeoning developer and businessman and quite an entrepreneur.
Now, who
and
won,
my son Trevor, who works with me.
Now, I'd be inappropriate. Who won the delicatessen sandwich eating in June?
I won this year. My son David won the year before. But we have a wonderful contest where we raise money for the Volunteer Lawyers for Social Justice, and we have a competition, my son and I, as to who can name the best sandwich and who could sell the most of them.
And I'm so happy that I did the profile of the life of a good friend today.
Thanks.
And thanks for being here.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.